On today's show, the injury bug continues to hit the Leafs, and Craig Berube turns up the heat in practice. We'll discuss that more here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Leafs podcast. We're locked in on everything with the Toronto Maple Leafs, hosted by myself, David Morassutti, covering the Leafs for the last 10 years on various platforms, including Sportsnet, this podcast, and many other shows. I want to thank you all for making the Locked On Leafs podcast your first listen of the day, and for making the Locked On Network the number one sports podcast network in North America. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. I'm sure there's going to be many bets coming in on the Leafs as they look to end their 5-game losing streak with the St. Louis Blues in town. And it looks like Craig Berube is ready to make his case to get this Leafs team to start to turn things around. He is really starting to take real hold of this team and trying to get them out of this losing streak that they've been on. 5 games that they've gone without a win. And in practice on Monday, Craig Berube was not a happy camper. A couple of videos, if you haven't seen them out there, we won't be able to play them because there's a bit of language that we probably want to avoid. And yes, some of them are bleeped out, but we want to keep it to PG on the podcast. But clearly, Craig Berube not thrilled with what he was seeing, shouting at players at various times. William Nylander taking the brunt of one of them as Berube is trying to get his top players to start playing back to the style that he believes is going to be successful. And unfortunately, he's really had to turn up the intensity there. And you know, a lot of the players, I'm sure, have seen Berube take an intense approach at practice. This, you know, in a losing streak that they've been on, the details are important. And I think that's what Craig Berube is trying to get to with his team, because it's been tough sledding, right? 5 games they've gone and on pace for about 78 points is what I last saw. That's not what this team was expected. This team was expected to be in the 100-point range, right? After finishing with about 108 points last year to win top spot in the Atlantic Division. It is not good enough. And until they can turn things around, people are going to start wondering whether this Leafs team can actually get back to his previous form. Can they get back to the playoffs, right? We're having that conversation on November 18th, whether this Leafs team can get into the playoffs. And, you know, a lot of heat being directed not only on the players, but on Craig Berube himself. Is he the guy to get this Leafs team back on track? He's now gone into the bag a little bit here, and he's using, you know, a Leafs practice. You're not going to get away with a couple of people talking about the coach yelling at players. There are a lot of not only reporters there, but cameras. There's obviously a couple of videos of him really pushing his players at practice. And, you know, there's a lot of things that was being worked on, right? Forwards trying to win retrieve pucks in the forecheck, trying to get that time of possession. And on the back end, all about the breakout. All about the breakout. How do we get the puck out of our zone? Because that has been a big issue with the Leafs over the last, pretty much the entire season. And look, we have seen once again, you know, jumbling around with injuries. We'll get to the rash of injuries. We just found out, got a couple of updates on players, and it's some unfortunate updates on a few others as the Leafs try to figure out what are they going to do. What are they going to do to try to get themselves out of it? Now, look, there are positives you can take from the last game against Chicago. But the one positive you can't find is the fact that the game ended in a loss, and a regulation loss too. So it's easy. I know in the last video, it's easy to say, they played better, but it wasn't good enough. At the end of the day, that's what people mostly care about. Was it a win or was it a loss? Right. And so the one thing I want to caution everybody about, and this is part of the reason why I'm doing a solo podcast, because I read the comments, I hear what people are saying. I'm reading a lot of the stories too, what the Leafs need to do to get themselves out of this rut that they're in. Fire the coach, make a trade. Aren't many other avenues being explored, right? Because really, what other avenues are there? Well, I'm gonna start with the Craig Berube one, because at some point, yes, it could get to a point where people are saying this is not good enough. This Leafs team cannot be in a position for a lost season given what they have given up. If it's a coaching issue, all right, let's make a coaching change. And my question, whenever somebody asks me, should a team fire a coach, a GM? My follow-up question is, okay, you fire the coach, you fire the GM, who's taking over? Who's the next guy in charge? Because, in some cases, and look, I'll bring up Craig Berube when he was hired in St. Louis. That was a different situation where you had Craig Berube, kind of waiting in the wings there to take over and put his stamp on this team, after what they were going through, right? But I just see, when you have a Leafs team like this, and teams go through struggles, it isn't always going to be rosy, right? I think the important thing that people need to be reminded of in these situations is things have changed with this team. It's not the same team for the last, few years, right? Players are in and out. Injuries have also taken a bit of a, they've played a factor in this as well. But I think what people need to also remember, okay, when it comes to Craig Berube, they had success last year with Craig Berube, okay? Now, I totally understand that players have, there's changes that have been made with the roster itself. It's an older team, so, is their style jiving with the current NHL? I still think it is. I think there's still talent on the team. I still think there's still skill on this team. But there's clearly elements that need to be improved. The blue line being probably the top one. Goaltending, we saw, Joseph Woll, who played a lot better in net. He started to get things, maybe it starts trending in the right direction if you get a little bit of goaltending, right? Goaltender can help turn a lot of things around. But I think the one thing when it comes to Craig Berube is you gotta let him exhaust all avenues that he has. We haven't seen him really push the buttons like he did. And this could be one of those coaches are waiting for the right moment to use that card, because it doesn't always work. And you can't have a coach constantly doing it, because the message then falls on deaf ears in a lot of cases, right? So I think we're not at the point with Craig Berube yet. I really don't, unless it's like a god-awful 10-game losing streak. I'm like, not for everything that is, like, just please give me some peace, not having to deal with the 10-game losing streak. Okay? But I think the Craig Berube part still a little premature to talk about that. A trade. Personally, I don't know what a trade really does, in my opinion. Like, they talk about Rasmus Andersson right now. And look, I was on the, if you're going to make a trade for Rasmus Andersson, this team should not be in a position to move future assets. They've done a way too much over the last few years. I get it. Cup or bust in a lot of cases. They're pushing for that cup. They think they've got the pieces there. They are right now investing too much in an older roster. They need to start keeping their picks because it's going to get tougher and tougher to transition with this group if you don't have young talent ready to come up and provide a little bit of that spark that this team needs. The other thing too, Rasmus Andersson is not going to change things, right? Really that much. He's not the best defenseman in terms of defending. A lot of people say Morgan Rielly light or Morgan Rielly 2.0, Morgan Rielly right shot. That's what it is, right? Maybe the attitude changes. Maybe it galvanizes the group. But what is that actually going to cost? What were you going to have to give up to get a Rasmus Andersson? That is also the other concerning part. Because we know the Calgary Flames do not really want to do business with Brad Treliving. Like, it's just the way it is. So I think right now, Craig Berube, it's up to him. To this point, it always has been. But it's going to be up to him to get this group to turn things around. And his job didn't get any easier because we have more injuries to talk about. We got a few updates, a few non-updates. How concerning can that be as they look to try to get off the losing streak? The St. Louis Blues are in town. Could this be a chance for the Leafs to get back in the win column? We'll discuss that more here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The NHL season is in full swing, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next or even third period comebacks. Plus, you can even combine live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. Keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making the late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's show is also brought to you by Doer. I'm so excited to get these jeans. I've heard so many amazing things about, and I hear they're coming in soon. And I'm really curious to see how good the performance is with these jeans and how comfortable they can be. Doer has 5 times the stretch of traditional denim. They're antibacterial, meaning your jeans stay fresh longer so you can wear them more and wash them less. And they're made with Cool Max that regulates your body temperature and wicks moisture. Keeps you cool and comfortable as temperatures change. Doer jeans also feel stretchy without looking stretchy. And that's the last thing you want. You don't want them to look tired, and you want them to be comfortable. It's like you're wearing your favorite pair of synthetic joggers, but look like you're dressed to go out on the town. Doer combines classic jean wear with this kind of comfort and performance that you get from athletic wear. They're designed to look great and stay comfortable all day, no matter what you're doing. Doer are pioneers of blending technical innovation and everyday clothing. They invented the performance denim. Simply put, Doer makes the world's most comfortable pants without having to sacrifice style. And you can check them out here in Toronto. It's at 44 Ossington Avenue. Pick a pair for yourself or as an amazing holiday gift. Use our promo code Locked On Toronto in store to get 15% off your first order, or check them out at doer.ca/LockedOnToronto for 15% off. That's doer.ca/LockedOnToronto. The Locked On These podcast continues. As you can tell, it's David Morassutti here, but who is not here, is my co-host Mike DeStefano. He is away this week, enjoying his anniversary on the seas. Saw some videos of him enjoying a bit of the music. Very nice. I said, you get away from everything that's going on with the Leafs right now, because It has not been pretty. Hasn't been pretty at all. And look, as with all with all the talk about how the Leafs have been playing, and part of it also has been about injuries, but I feel like the injuries haven't been talked about enough. Okay. And I'm not going to use it as an excuse because all teams deal with injuries and they find a way. Usually they do. But as we found out today, Nick Waugh, who had one of his better games with the team, upper body injury, will not play against the St. Louis Blues. That is now a third center on your team that has been sidelined by an injury. Aren't many teams that can get over that many injuries down the middle. You can get by with a defenseman being out, depending on the team. A couple of wingers, sure. But center, that is one of the hardest things to try to replace. And so we don't know exactly what happened with Nick Waugh. Again, day-to-day upper body injury. The good news, Scott Laughton was back at practice skating. He still remains out, but maybe he's inching closer because if Nick Waugh's out, they're going to need one of Scott Laughton or Austin Matthews back because it really puts a lot of pressure on Tavares, Max Domi. Steven Lorentz right now is playing center. And guess what? Jacob Quillan gets himself called up because the Leafs need a center. They don't have anybody else that they really feel comfortable putting out there at center. I know we talked about maybe Cal Yarncroc can do that. The Leafs are not ready to do that. They also need bodies because you're dealing with so many injuries. You need to bring guys up. So Jacob Quillan was called up from the Marlies. He did make his NHL debut last season, and he played in the one game. He's actually been doing pretty well with the Marlies. He has 14 points in 14 games. Not much of a goal scorer, 2 goals in those 14 games, but 14 points. You know, he's trying to get himself into this conversation. 23 years old. Good opportunity right now for Jacob Quillan to get some NHL game action right now, and rewarded for some strong play with the Marlies. But, you know, Scott Laughton coming back would certainly help in this situation. Hopefully he gets a little bit closer. Austin Matthews, the big problem, he hasn't even skated since being injured against the Boston Bruins. We know that Chris Tanev remains out. He's been skating on his own. We really haven't seen him with the team. Brandon Carlo placed on injured reserve, so we know now that he's going to be sidelined for a bit. And it's just, it kind of, when it rains, it pours with this team with these injuries. It's not easy because it does impact how your lineup looks. And we'll discuss the impact that these injuries will have on the lineup. How is it going to look? Do they have a shot, even with these injuries, to end their losing streak against St. Louis Blues? I'll discuss that next here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by Rugiet. Let's be real, making excuses doesn't solve anything. We've all heard them before. It's just stressed, I'm tired, or it happens to everyone sometimes. But when it comes to performance, sometimes your body needs a little extra support, and that's where Rugiet comes in. Rugiet.com offers fast-acting, doctor-prescribed treatments for ED designed to help you stop making excuses and start making moves. Rugiet makes it to get started. You just connect with a board-certified doctor, 100% online, no awkward waiting rooms, no in-person appointments. If prescribed, your treatment ships discreetly straight to your door. The process is fast, simple, and private, and it's all handled by a real doctor. It's about confidence, connection, and getting back to the normal that matters. Visit Rugiet.com/LockedOnNHL to get 15% off your first order. That's Rugiet.com/LockedOnNHL. And don't forget to use our code LockedOnNHL so they know we sent you. Rugiet, stop making excuses and start making moves. Want to welcome you all back to the Locked On Leafs podcast, and want to thank you guys for making the Locked On Leafs podcast your first listen and making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network in North America. And you can check out other great shows here on the Locked On Podcast Network. For your second listen, check out all the new NHL. Check out the all-new NHL on Locked On NHL game night. Every game, every night until Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysts on your national scale. Find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Some great content over there if you want to get the temperature of what's going on around the NHL. And next in town for the Leafs, they're back at home, and they are going to be hosting the St. Louis Blues, who, ever since the Craig Berube year of winning the Stanley Cup, it just hasn't really gone well for the Blues. Like they've made, they've had some decent seasons. They made the playoffs last year. We all know how that ended against the Winnipeg Jets. This season, it has been a struggle for the St. Louis Blues. Like if you think things aren't going well in Toronto, it hasn't been going much better for the St. Louis Blues. They are 6-9-4, so they have 16 points on the season, a -22 goal differential. -22. It is the worst goal differential in the NHL. This seems like a good opportunity for the Leafs to maybe get some confidence back against an opponent that has struggled. They've lost their last 2 games. They lost 4-1 to the Golden Knights on Saturday. They've had some close games, I will say, but this is if you're talking about opportunities to get it out of this losing streak, this is it right here for the Leafs, a team that struggled. Jordan Kyrou has been dealing with an injury. He is on the road trip with St. Louis, but he is not expected to play against Toronto. He's not really expected to play until later in the week. And look, the Leafs are dealing with their own injuries, but they got to step up. They just got to find a way. And how are they going to find a way? Well, let's take a look at this lineup. For those of you that are watching on YouTube, those who are not watching and listen, I'll just read off the lines. Nick Robinson, John Tavares, and William Nylander, that still remains the top line. Yeah, Matthew Nyes with Max Domi and Easton Cowan. So Domi gets bumped up with Nicolas Waugh out, which also means a change on the third line. You still got Matthias Michelli and Bob McMahon there, but it will be Jacob Quillan getting the start as third line center between those two. So it'll be very interesting to see how that line plays. And you got Dakota Joshua, Steven Lorentz, and Kelly Yarncroc on the fourth line. There was also another change, and it was on the blue line. You got Morgan Rielly, Oliver Ekman-Larsson. That's a new first pair. Simon Benoit and Jake McCabe are together still. Dakota Mermis still in the lineup, and it's Troy Stecher, the new addition for the Leafs. He will be on the third pairing with Mermis. That means Philip Myers draws out. Craig Berube did talk a little bit about Myers and says his game just hasn't looked the same as it did last year. We need to get him back to that. And not surprising, it will be him sitting out with Stecher coming in. And we got Joseph Woll starting with Dennis Hildeby backing him up. Again, not the most ideal lineup. When you looked at, I'm sure many of you, when you saw a November 18th game against the Blues, don't think anybody expected no Matthews, no Laughton, no Tanev, no Carlo, and no Anthony Stolarz. They're 5 pretty, crucial. I wouldn't say obviously Austin Matthews, #1 center, but that's tough. That's a lot of bodies out. But you know what? They made it a close game against Chicago. And the Blues, they played the Leafs tough. You can't give the St. Louis Blues, really, you can't overlook them. You can't overlook any opponent when you're on a 5-game losing streak. Let's be honest here. But the Leafs really are going to have to figure out a way to get off the schneid. And again, when you look at where can this Leafs team try to exploit, look at the fact that, hey, William Nylander, he got an earful at practice. He still has 26 points on the year. John Tavares, 11 goals. Like, there are still players who are playing pretty well right now for this team. And, as bad as the Leafs have been with the goals against at 3.79, the Blues haven't been much better. 3.84. They're a worse defending team than the Leafs. Now, you also have a better power play than the Leafs, has performed better. But the Leafs have also got the better offense at 3.53 goals per game. The Blues, 2.79. So, and look, there are some injuries too with the Blues. Neighbors, as I said, is out. Torrey Krug, he hasn't played at all this year. So, like, the big one is Neighbors for them. But the rest of the team just hasn't really come up to snuff with all the injuries and stuff. So I'll be curious to see, will the Leafs be able to rise to this occasion? This is as good as an opportunity as you're going to be able to get this losing streak back on track, get yourself back in the win column, edge closer to being a 500 team. And look, you got to start somewhere. And this is probably the best opportunity for the Leafs to get themselves somewhat back into the conversation here, because at this rate, it's not even talk about the division and where things are in the division. Just get back to being a winning hockey club. And look, Florida has been through a tough time. Tampa has been through a tough time too. The Leafs, not as many excuses when you consider the schedule that they've had. The injuries have been really the big one for them. But at the same time, there's enough talent on this team of players who are still here, able to make an impact. I mean, that's probably where Craig Berube really started to get his frustrations at practice, because there are players who are definitely not playing to their caliber right now. And as I said, there isn't a quick fix to all this. It really comes down to the players and Berube to get these players to focus on the details that they have not been getting right since the start of the year. So we'll see if the Leafs will be able to do that. You can watch the game Tuesday night. I believe that the game is going to be on TSN. I'm trying to figure that out for you guys, but I'm pretty sure it's on. It is on TSN. And this is, again, can the Leafs step up? Can they find a way to quiet the noise? Because there are going to be more talks about whether more players need to be moved, right? It might come to the point where if players are not performing well enough, and if some of these younger guys, I look at Jacob Quillan, Troy Stecher is going to get a look here. Other Marlies players, if some of these players, Easton Cowan and and some, maybe even a couple of guys on the blue line, can start stepping up a little bit here, could the Leafs look to move out players to make room for these younger guys and give them an opportunity? Be interesting to see, but let's see if they can just get by the Blues first. That has to be the first and foremost, the priority. And we will discuss the game. We'll go give hopefully we'll be talking about a Leafs win. Hopefully we'll be talking about the end of the losing streak, and hopefully a start of getting back to what is the norm for this team. But I want to thank you all for listening and for supporting the show. Make sure you go and subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. Make sure you go and check us out on YouTube, Locked On Leafs. Follow us at Locked On Leafs, and follow myself on X at @D_Morassutti. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.